Hello, I'm Frank Deptola, Managing Member of Frank Deptola & Associates. We're a wealth management firm catering to affluent clients, business owners, and their families. My firm has gotten heavily involved in working with special needs trusts, attorneys, and fiduciaries that specialize in special needs trusts, and in properly structuring financial investments for individuals with special needs in such a way that they're put in a better position to get the full benefits of government-sponsored aid programs. Programs like Supplemental Security Income, SSI, and Social Security Disability Insurance, SSDI. Today, I'm pleased to welcome Daniel E. Fortuno, President and CEO of Benefits Education Center, Long Beach, California. Daniel founded the BEC about 10 years ago, and today the BEC provides disability benefits training and private benefits coaching to individuals living with their disabilities, their families, and to professionals like me who provide services to that community. His stated mission is to improve access to public and private health coverage for all people with disabilities and to provide them and their service providers comprehensive and accurate information on disability and health coverage through group training programs, community presentations, client advocacy, and individual client coaching. So Dan, welcome here.
Thank you.
Tell me your story.
Well, back in the 90s, I started to work in the HIV/AIDS community trying to be a part of the solution, and I did case management. And the challenge I had was when I was trying to get people on different programs, there was no set ways, there was nobody teaching us how to actually deal with the system. So I made a friend, Ms. Lovato at Social Security Administration in Sacramento, and she mentored me for the few years that I was in Sacramento. Then I went to San Francisco and got mentored by somebody who understood private benefits and discovered that I actually really enjoyed training too. Skipping forward, I decided to start a training foundation, and I had Options Benefits Training Foundation for a few years, where I trained from New York all the way to Hawaii and did different trainings to different organizations on how to be able to do this work.
So you've covered the nation then, basically.
Pretty much I've done, I know specifically 14 states. The real big differences in the states, though, because most of what we deal with now is national, are the Medicaid systems, or as we call it in California, Medi-Cal.
When you get a disability under a government program like Social Security Administration's qualifications, there's some sort of evaluation process that people go through, right?
Yeah, the thing with Social Security, a lot of people assume that when you're going to get granted the benefits, your doctor is going to fill out a form, or your doctor is going to certify your disability. Well, that's the case in state programs like California State Disability or TDI in the state of Hawaii, which is their short-term disability program. But with Social Security, they're actually looking at the whole medical record, and they have what's called a 5-step sequential evaluation process.
Tell me about that.
Well, the 5-step sequential evaluation process is where they actually literally have 5 questions that they review every case for. The first one is step 1. They want to know if the individual is working, and if they are working, they want to know if they're earning SGA. SGA is substantial, gainful activity, and it's a dollar amount that can change every year. There are a few years where it didn't change, but most recently it has been changing. For 2017, SGA is $1,170. So that's kind of like the benchmark to determine, and it's a national number. So
is that for a year or for a month?
Per month.
Per month.
That is per month. And that is a national per month benchmark where people say, well, I live in New York, or I live in San Francisco, or I live in Florida. They look at the whole country and they average it out. Mm-hmm. So if you're able to earn substantial gainful activity, whatever it is for that particular year, then you're denied, regardless of how disabled you are. If you're under SGA or you're not working, you go to step number 2. Okay. Step number 2 is they want to know if you have a severe impairment. And that's where they look at the job that you're most recently doing. They'll look at that most recent job and see, based on the medical evidence you've provided, which is your medical records, are you able to do the work that you most recently did? If you are, you're denied. If you're not, you go to step number 3.
So if you can't perform the job that you most recently did, but would have to take a lesser position, then that's something that's to your favor, right, in the qualification for benefits.
Yes.
Okay.
So if you're not able to do your regular work, then you go to step number 3. Step number 3 is where they evaluate if you meet what's called listing level of impairment.
Say it again.
Listing level of impairment. Okay. And Social Security literally has a book which is called the Blue Book. And the Blue Book literally was blue. They even have a red book. And the Blue Book has all the conditions that are considered to be automatic qualifiers, and they specifically explain how those conditions have to manifest themselves to meet Social Security criteria. It's kind of like an apple pie. An apple pie is one item, but it contains a host of different ingredients. So whenever they announce or they discuss a particular condition, there's specific ways that the condition has to manifest itself to qualify. So if you meet step 3, and you have what's called the listing level of impairment that's in that Blue Book, you're granted at step number 3 and don't have to do step number 4 and 5.
So this is kind of a progressive step. If you don't meet the first requirement, you can't go to step 2. If you meet steps 1 and 2 and you meet step 3, then you're qualified.
Exactly. Okay. Exactly. And that's why what we like to do is we like to review medical records and make sure that if there is a listing level of impairment, that we announce it on the front end. So they're not hunting for it in pages. You know, I've had people come to me that have had conditions, you know, stage 4 cancer, where there's been a lot going on, and it was missed. It wasn't captured. And the truth of the matter is that these evaluators, you know, have many cases they're dealing with, and the more a case is presented in a way where they can see what they're looking at to, you know, go towards, it makes it easier for them to be able to make a favorable
It's kind of the old thing, state what you want to get right up front. Exactly. And then explain it. Don't bury it in the fluff.
Exactly. And a lot of times, you know, some of those specific criterias, you know, could be on only one page in 900 pages of medical records. And if it's missed, then it's missed how they meet listing level of impairment. Now, that doesn't always happen, but it has happened. Mm-hmm. You know, so it's really important that if somebody has a listing level of impairment, that the medical record, you know, is made reference to, and specifically how they meet the criteria is brought up.
Okay, so what happens? How do you get to steps 4 and 5? What happens there?
Well, if you don't meet a listing level of impairment, then you go to step number 4. And in step number 4, they want to know your residual functional capacity, and it's a fancy way to say that what they're going to look at is the work that you've done the last up to 15 years. So they're going to look back and review the work that you've done. They're going to look at your medical record and see, based on the disability, because they're not saying that you aren't disabled. They're saying, based with the disability you have, can you do the work you used to do? And that would be any job that you've had. Exactly. Any work that you've either been trained for or that you've done. Okay. And that's step number 4. If you're not able to do that, then you go to step number 5.
Which is?
Well, step number 5 is they're literally going to look at the age and the education of the individual, and they're going to look at the U.S. economy, and they're going to see, is there a job that you can do in the U.S. economy?
Give me an example of that.
Well, some of the challenges I could tell you is when I work with Native American communities, you can have an individual that could be trained for a job, but there are no jobs in that area. And they've been denied because they had the ability to be able to do the job somewhere else in the country. Or when I've worked in Hawaii, you know, I've worked in some remote areas because I used to do a lot of work with indigenous communities. That was part of the funding that I had when I had options. And so I always had to be real clear that people understood this is not unemployment. This is not because you can't find a job. It's because you don't have the ability, because of your disability, to do any job that exists in the U.S. economy based on your age and education at step 5. And this is why step number 3 is so important. Because if we can get somebody in at 3, we don't have to deal with step 4 and 5.
And your preference would be to try to get them qualified earlier in this sequential process rather than later.
Exactly, yeah, because it makes it easier for everybody.
So tell me the difference between SSI and SSDI. And I'm not sure one is better than the other, but under what circumstances would one be preferred over the other?
Well, first of all, one of the areas that people get into trouble when it comes to SSI and SSDI, the actual acronym. They get them confused. And when I do trainings, I always refer to them as the twins because they look alike, they sound alike, but they're completely different programs.
How so?
They're different in one is based on need and one is based on contributions. So the SSI Supplemental Security Income Program is going to be a program that is going to be based on the individual showing that they have a disability and they have a need. The need is shown by you have to have less than $2,000 in the bank, which is a number that was actually created in the 70s when you could buy a Toyota Corolla for that or a down payment on a house.
So it's not adjusted for inflation?
No, it is not. And it has not been. And they've tried to adjust it, but it's never happened, in all the years I've been doing this. So they're going to look at what you have as an individual under the Supplemental Security Income Program. And what I try to get people to understand is the name of the program is supplemental. So it's designed to provide based on need. It has the same definition of disability, which is the doorway in. But what determines if you're eligible for it is if you demonstrate the need. That $2,000 in the bank, one house, one car. And then depending upon the state you live, it determines the amount that you get. Like in the state of California, we currently are supplementing in 2017 up to $895.72. If you live in...
So what does that mean, $895.72? That's the most they can get from this program?
That's the monthly amount that you're eligible for, correct.
Okay, and how does there, the other item we talked about was about $1,000 a month in workable wages. How do those two interact, if at all?
Okay, so when we talk about the issue of substantial gainful activity, that principle of $1,170 is used in multiple places. The first place I discussed it was when somebody's qualifying for disability. Now, if the individual continues to make substantial gainful activity...
More than that amount.
More than that amount, then you're dealing with a whole different set of rules. Okay. So the way I explain it in my trainings is you have the rules to get onto the program, and then once you're established in the program, what are the rules that impact you when you have work activity? So to answer your question, because benefits are like a dysfunctional family and they don't make any common sense, if you have an individual that is SSI eligible, what is going to happen when they do work activity, they're going to be, the wages are subjected to what's called the countable income calculation. And that is a calculation where they take and they look at the dollar amount, they subtract $65, $20, there's some other deductions, and then what is left is divided by 2, then that becomes the amount that the benefit is reduced. Now, if we were to talk about the SSDI program, which we haven't gotten into yet, right, when it comes to explaining their rules, we need another half hour to be able to do that because their rules are very complicated and don't make any common sense whatsoever.
So SSI supplemental is based on need.
Correct.
SSDI is based on?
It's based on contributions. So what they're going to do is this program, it came about in 1956, and they decided that people are contributing to the FICA system, but they were becoming disabled or dying and not being able to access it. So in 1956, they said, let's go ahead and allow people to access that money, which is Social Security disability insurance. It's the same pot of money that you pay into, that you get retirement. It's kind of a form of early retirement, but instead of it being reduced because you access it early, you're vested in at your age with the amount of money that you've put into the system.
So once you get it, it won't be reduced?
Correct.
Okay.
So versus a 62 to an age 70 benefit, 62 is lower. The SSDI program's always going to be higher. That's why I have individuals that'll come and they're age 63, they're disabled. We go ahead and access to early retirement because the SSDI program does have a 5-month unpaid waiting period. And when you're getting state disability in the state of California, that will reduce the SSDI benefit. Then we transition them to SSDI, which is a higher benefit typically than an age 62 benefit. And I know that what I explained was a little fast, but it's kind of like... Yeah,
but you made the point. One is based on need and one is based on contribution.
Correct.
And you have to judge based on the individual facts and circumstances of each client which one is better for them.
Correct. And sometimes they'll be eligible for both. So I'll have somebody who may have a small work history and they're only eligible for $500 of Social Security disability. And then what we do is we have them also, if they demonstrate the need, the $2,000 in the bank, one house, one car, then we have them apply for SSI. And then so what happens is they get a supplement, and when you get both, you get an extra $20, which there was a time where that had a real value. Right. And you're combined in the state of California to $915.72.
Rather than the $865 or whatever it was.
$895.
Yeah.
Now, just to let you know, that is California. If you're in another state, like Las Vegas, you only get the federal amount. We have what's called a state supplement that raises it higher. And the federal amount is $735 for 2017.
So these benefit programs are a combination of federal funding and state funding, and depending on the state that you live in, is going to determine what the ultimate benefit would be.
Exactly. So you have your federal amount, which is the $735, and then you have about 6 states that have supplements that increase it. Some states had supplements, but they dropped the supplements. Like the state of Hawaii, the state supplement is currently 0.
And do you have, when you look at coordinating these benefits, are there any 2 or 3 triggers that you look at that goes through your mind when you're trying to compare which benefit might be better or how to combine them?
Yeah, I'm always looking at getting Social Security disability if I can possibly get it, because it also will include Medicare health coverage.
So SSDI would be the first option for you.
That I'm always trying to see if I can get SSDI. And SSDI, it just doesn't have to be the individual's contribution. You can have a disabled individual who was disabled prior to age 22, between 18 and 22, that can access benefits based on a parent's record if the parent is eligible, and the term of art is eligible, which refers to a parent being disabled, retired, or passed away.
So a retired parent with a disabled adult child could likely have some claim for SSDI benefits.
50% of what the parent is eligible for.
Significant.
And it is not a program that has anything to do with what you have in the bank. In other words, Bill Gates, if Bill Gates were to become disabled, he could get SSDI, and if he had a disabled child, his child could get 50% of whatever he's eligible for.
So not based on income, it's based on
contributions. Yeah.
Okay. Good. So obviously there's a lot of moving parts in these programs. And one of the reasons I wanted to do this program was to kind of put a really informative educational video together for people to help them kind of wade through this. So in your experience, and you've done this a long time through a number of different states, what are the 3 or 4 cardinal mistakes that people make when they apply for these kinds of benefits?
Well, typically, I see that people go into the system ill-prepared in that they don't understand the programs they're applying for. I'll have people who will call up and ask questions about SSI, and they're not eligible for SSI. They're actually paid into SSDI. And they get the answers for the SSI program, and they start preparing to spend down their resources and do all of these things.
And we see that as well.
Yeah, and it's not necessary because they didn't know the difference. So the first thing is really, that people oftentimes will move forward without understanding which of the programs are appropriate.
Or they'll delay in filing, right? They just won't do it.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I've had families that I have families that are high net worth families that will have children that are age 50, and now mom and dad are in the 70s and 80s or 90s, and they're like, well,
concerned about their own longevity and
exactly. How do I support Johnny now? Exactly. And they didn't realize all along they could have, once Johnny turned 18, Johnny could have been eligible for supplemental security income even if Johnny didn't have a work history. And once mom or dad retired, Johnny could have been eligible for benefits based on their contributions. But now in those cases, what I have to hunt for is, can I find old medical evidence for that person between the ages of 18 and 22? And I've done it in one case where I went back to the 70s, but I had evidence.
So let me emphasize that point. What you're saying is that keeping really good medical records is very important for qualifying for these programs, and that you have to put together a detailed history of the claim, being able to document it over a number of years in order to be successful in many of these cases.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. And there are some key time periods.
Such as
18 to 22. So if you have an individual that has a disability, I'll give you an example. I had a young woman who was visually impaired, okay? politically correct way to say blind. She'd been tested at age 17. We started the Social Security process and they said, you have no current evidence at the age of 18. It's like, well, she didn't gain vision. So we had to retest her at age 18. So it's real important that people realize that if you're going for the adult benefit, you have to have evidence that's after age 18. And if you want to capture benefit in the future off of a parent or from a parent's record, you have to have that evidence between 18 and 22. Then whenever you apply, you need to have evidence that's within, I would say, a 6-month window. They say a year.
From the date of the application.
Correct. They say a year, but I've had people that said that's not current enough, so that's why I made my rule 6 months. Okay. So I make sure that people know if we're going to move forward, we have to have current evidence, at least within the last 6 months, so that we have a way to be able to demonstrate, the disability.
And is there a third period? So now you've qualified for the benefit, and do you have to do anything to continue to qualify? Are there any records? Yeah. What records might you need to keep to continue to qualify?
What I tell my clients is make sure, regardless of your disability, if your disability has zero change and it's never going to change for the rest of your life, at least see the doctor twice a year.
Twice a year.
So that your medical record continues to tell your story. Your medical record is your story, and people don't get that. Right. Oftentimes people underreport. They horrifically underreport. How are you doing today? Oh, I'm doing fine. And that person may have gotten used to their disability, and it's a good day for them, but they're fully disabled, but they're not discussing it, so their medical record no longer is telling their story.
Another mistake I've seen, I'm sure you've seen it too, is that people assume that when one of their family members becomes disabled, they can at that time get a physician or a medical provider, they're very qualified people, to write some sort of report for them and qualify them for benefits, when in fact Social Security typically looks at the long history of this medical record, and they go back many years, and it's really incumbent on the person themselves to make their own case. They have to make their own story for the disability, not rely on a doctor or a medical provider to do this. Is that fair?
Yeah, that is very fair. Oftentimes I'll have people that will say, my doctor said I'm disabled, and my doctor said he'll fill out whatever I need done. And I'm like, that's wonderful, but we still need to see your medical records, because if all of a sudden your doctor's on board but there's no history, then you're going to have a problem. So that doctor can write a great letter and make a great statement and even use listing level of impairment language, but if there's no history that shows that listing level of impairment existed, then you're going to have a problem.
And Social Security is going to shine a light in those dark areas of the past.
Correct.
To see if you've kept the records and how long this disability has existed and what you've done with it.
Yeah, and they're not in any way adversarial. They're really just trying to implement that 5-step process. Right. And what they're trying to do is, it's when you deal with Social Security, it's all about presenting your case with the facts. They look at the facts and they make decisions based on what they're reviewing, not the person, because the person who's making the decision actually never physically meets the disabled
Again,
individual.
re-emphasizing the importance is to state it up front exactly what you're looking for and why you're making the case, and not burying that story in 20, 30 pages of fluff. Get it out and tell your story right from the beginning.
Exactly, and understand how to tell your story in a way that they're going to respond to it. Because if you could use listing level of impairment when you're describing your condition initially, they're going to know what to look for. It's right there for them to look for it.
Okay, so people make mistakes when they apply for these benefits, obviously. I'm going to throw out a couple. You probably have a few of your own. But one thing that dawns on me is that this can be an overwhelming process. I mean, can you elaborate on that? I mean, my questions on this for you, Daniel, are what's a typical time period for a person to complete and provide the necessary documentation to Social Security to qualify for these benefits, especially if they haven't kept good medical records?
Well, what I have historically seen is individuals can take from 1 year to 3 years to get through the system.
1 to 3 years?
1 to 3 years.
And what do they do in that 1 to 3 year period?
Well, if they're in the state of California, state disability only lasts for 12 months. Oftentimes, that's where people really struggle financially.
And spend down their other assets. And
if they have them, they're going to have to. Now, in my practice, we have about a 3 to 6 month turnaround as far as getting people approved. That 1 to 3 years is if somebody does a traditional application, they work with a traditional Social Security attorney, where they do their magic is in front of the judge. To get in front of a judge, currently in California, it takes about 2 years.
Wow.
Just to get in front of a judge. And you have to be denied initially.
Fascinating.
At the reconsideration and then at the hearing level.
So what you can do is shorten that curve considerably by doing the pre-work up front and getting them in front of the judge sooner than...
Well, no, we don't even go in front of a judge.
Okay, so you just get it approved by doing the pre-work and having them submit it properly up front, and then it's not basically not fair to say it's not contested, but it's done in such a manner that most of the time you've covered the contingencies that they would need to cover in order to get their claim processed.
Yeah, we have about an 87% success rate on initial claims.
Okay.
And so our goal is we want to present a case that is clear, that tells the person's story. We summarize it, and we have found that if we summarize with listing level of impairment and actually have a letter that the doctor signs off on, and then provide the medical evidence to follow that up, that actually makes a big difference.
So this gets into the pre-work that we've talked about already. It's really important. That was my second point here. What would you say is described as waiting until the last minute? I mean, when is a person almost too late in applying for these benefits?
Well, a good example would be the Social Security disability insurance has a time period from the start of the disability that you have to apply to still be eligible. You have to have paid into the system 5 of the last 10 years. So there are people, let's say, for example, you might have a stay-at-home parent who paid into the system for 20 years, and now they're staying at home taking care of a family member or a child, okay? And then they deal with the disability. After 5 years of not paying into the system,
they're kicked out.
They're not eligible for SSDI anymore. And I've seen people where they've had a disability, and they're living on their savings and their, whatever they have, and, they're kind of running out of it, and it's like they've lost, they should have applied when they first stopped working if there was a disability.
Okay, so they need to be aware if you have a family member with special needs that you're supporting, as soon as you stop working, you need to apply for at least SSDI.
Correct. That individual, the minute they stop working, yes, SSDI would be, the benefit. Well, state disability in California or what other state you're in, because there's 6 others, and then Social Security, the Social Security disability insurance. Okay,
so talk to me. We get a lot of people that. And you do too, that come in and they have they got some advice from someplace, and they either didn't understand the advice that they were given, or they were given very bad advice. Give me an example of what some bad advice situations you've seen.
Well, it's not uncommon, as I mentioned before, that people get the programs confused. And because of that, they'll have this one direction that they're focused on, and it's not even a program that they qualify for. That's the biggest one.
Okay.
The other
So they've wasted a lot of time applying for something they're never going to get, and at the same token, would it be fair to say they're not doing anything to get the program that they're really entitled to?
Well, fortunately...
We're not doing enough.
Well, fortunately, with the SSI program, even though the individual may have done all of these things to get their resources down, the SSI program will always take an SSDI application if they see there's money in the system.
So it's like taxes. The federal government talks with each of the state governments, and the state governments talk with the federal governments, and they share databases. And so when you get a notice from one, you get the notice from that. Comes from my MS tax background, but I mean it's the same principle. The government agencies talk to each other.
Those two do, because they're under the same roof, the SSI, SSDI. Where the problem occurs is that individual may have done spending down all their money, doing all these things that they didn't need to do, and then they don't even find out about it till later.
And I guess that's kind of what I was looking for under getting bad advice. You're spending down assets you can never replace when you maybe didn't really have to do that.
Oh, I had a person come to me years ago when I used to work, when I originally started working in HIV and AIDS, and this gentleman sold his house, he sold his car, he lived off of that, he did his 401k, and then he came in to see us because he said, well, I thought I couldn't have anything. And I'm like, you could, and you're eligible for $1,500 a month. And we were able to get him on benefits, but he had exhausted so many things he didn't need to do because he didn't know.
He didn't know, yeah. And that ties into what we talked about earlier. You know, had he used a person like you, he probably wouldn't have made those mistakes. And so you get into, there's a famous movie where a guy said he was replacing his kitchen. It was actually the Hoffa movie. And Jack Nicholson was playing Hoffa. And they said that his new kitchen replacement is costing him a fortune. And the guy said to him, well, why don't you do it yourself? He said, I did. So it's that type of thing. You need to seek professional help at some point on some of this.
And at least the baseline, make sure that you understand the programs and what they require. Right. That's the biggest thing. That's why part of
and don't misinterpret what advice you get from it, because you know you get bombarded with so much information when you get put on long holds, or you get bombarded with so much information from these government agencies that are trying legitimately to help, but they've got lots of people to help, and let's face it, people aren't as sophisticated as you are in coordinating these benefits, or as the Social Security person is on the other end of the line. And so they can easily misinterpret what's being told to them.
Well, and also, too, you know, they can call somebody who's well-intending, but may not have a good experience in explaining how the programs work, and goes through and explains it using acronyms and goes through it very quickly. So then the person listening is just going, oh, my God, this doesn't make any sense. I don't understand it. And they're like, okay, bye. And that's it. So it's really important, you know, this is where doing internet research, you know, the Social Security website has improved tremendously from when it first started. Right. It really does have a lot of really good information. Yeah, they've made a great difference in the way that they present information. It's very concrete, it's clear. You know, do your homework and understand what you're doing before you do it. If you're going to go a trip to Alaska, you're not going to just get in your car and drive. You're going to at least, well, okay, you're going to have at least a road map, or nowadays they don't use maps. Right. They use, you know, you would have an address to go to via the GPS.
He happened to just take a driving tour to Alaska. He did plan that a little bit, but it was basically get in the car and go.
Well, yeah, and that's how you get lost.
Right. He's good at that. So tell me, we talked about the need to clearly document medical information to support these claims, and I think you indicated to me several times that there's really three things you look at to properly document a medical claim. What are those things?
So what I recommend to people is that whenever you have a symptom, let's say, for example, somebody's dealing with neuropathy, and neuropathy is kind of like your foot falls asleep and you get those needle feelings, for those of you that don't know what neuropathy is. So if you say in your medical record, I have neuropathy, well, that doesn't mean anything to the reader. But if you say, I have neuropathy that occurs daily and it lasts for 3 to 4 hours, on a scale of 1 to 10, it's a 9, now the reader understands the frequency, the duration, and the severity of the particular symptom you're describing.
So frequency, duration, and severity. Be specific is what you're saying.
Exactly.
Tell your story.
Exactly. And negotiate with your medical provider that they document it to that level. Doctors.
So what you're saying is check.
Yes.
You know, what did you put in my record, doctor?
Yes.
You know, I want you to put it in this way.
I'll tell people, you know, if you want, do a diary.
Right.
You know, and then ask, you got to negotiate with your doctors, because some doctors don't like diaries, but some doctors will take that diary and put it in the record. And that diary, instead of it being an allegation of what you're saying, now that it's part of the medical record and being used to treat you, it's actually supportive documentation.
Ah, good point. Good point. Okay. So let's talk about 3 example cases as a way to touch upon some of these various considerations that people would have as they apply for these benefits. So in your mind, what I'm asking you to do is listen to these cases. I'm going to read them here to you. I'm going to ask you a few questions on them and tell me how you would approach the case, okay? So the first case is a woman and her husband. They have 2 white-collar jobs. They make $150,000 annually in combined income. They have a home mortgage. They've got a 401k or 2 401ks. 3 children, ages 12, 19, and 34. The 34-year-old daughter has been diagnosed with autistic spectrum disorder. She's also demonstrated a high level of general anxiety, difficulty in communication, and time management impairment. The parents want to apply for Social Security benefits, and the last neuropsychological evaluation of their daughter was a long time ago when she was age 13. So here are my questions. Let's take them one at a time. Walk me through this case. What goes through your mind when you think about benefits she could be eligible to receive?
The first thing I think of when I hear of a young person that has a disability that obviously has lasted since some time ago is there any medical evidence that we can capture 18 to 22? So
Documented evidence.
Documented medical evidence. Well, we know that we have, based on what you said, an evaluation that was done at age 13. Is there anything past that? Is there an IEP, which
Individual evaluation.
Right, which is done by the schools. What can we dig up, find? And then what we need to do is to get more current evidence. So we need to see, have there been any evaluations? Is there a way for the young person to be able to go back to that previous evaluator and get an update to the evaluation so that we can say this is the past and this is where she's at now. Has she improved? Is she the same, or are things worse?
So I think you're saying to me the first thing you would do is try to compile her story, try to put the record together as much as you can. What documents are there supporting her condition?
Exactly.
Okay. Second part of that question is, if you were the wife and husband, what would your next steps be?
Well, the next step would be is, first of all, understand what she would be eligible for and have a plan.
Okay.
Have a plan to understand we're going to be applying for, at this point, if she had a work history, it would be SSDI. If she did not have a work history, it would be SSI. We again want to capture that earlier onset date, so when mom or dad retires, which they will eventually, they could become disabled or they might die. Yeah, they're not going to live forever, that we can actually capture.
And she's getting older each year.
Exactly. So we can capture that benefit. But they would need to be focusing on, getting her on, making sure that there's current medical evidence to get her on the program now, and also to be able to establish there was an earlier onset date.
Okay. So what would this process look like for you? I mean, you're going to gather the medical records and you're going to talk and see whether she has a work history or not. And then you're going to write the story with their help to try to qualify this group, this family for these benefits. And then what do they do with that? Once you have this story written and documented as well as you can, they put it in the system, and what happens?
So we call our practice benefits coaching because we work in tandem with the family. Okay. So what I do is I make sure mom or dad, whoever's going to take the lead, understands what the process, what are the numbers to call, how to present the case, and then we would work at putting everything all in a nice package for them so that it would be presented in a way to where it's really clear. Okay. And so we would give them the instructions on if it's SSDI, if it's SSI, making sure.
And you would set their expectations too. This could be 6 months to 3 years that you're looking at.
Yeah, usually in my practice, it's usually 3 to 6 months.
3 to 6.
Yeah, unless we have a disability where there's nothing really concrete and you actually have to start developing the medical evidence while you're actually working.
So when you work with your clients, you would tell them, this is what I need from you. Mm-hmm. Go back through your records, do the work, mm-hmm. help me make the story, mm-hmm. and with factual evidence from what you've done in the past.
And I have somebody on staff who actually likes to read medical records. And actually is very good at it and is able to tickle out.
Don't ever lose them.
Exactly. Is able to tickle out, where the listing level of impairment, if that's the case.
Okay, good. Well, let's move to case 2 then. So this is a case, I actually had a person who used to work for me whose son has actually happened to them. So I've changed this significantly for the details, but a 21-year-old son of a single woman who has a history of being a daredevil, the son that is. He's always pushing the edge of the envelope in extreme sports. The woman, now 47, earns $100,000 per year working as a registered nurse in San Diego. She has a 17-year-old daughter ready to start college in the fall. So as you can imagine, she doesn't want anything interrupting this daughter's going to school. Her husband has not contributed or been involved with her children for many years. They're divorced. She's single. And she's also estranged from his parents. So there really isn't any means of support here. Her mother died a few years ago, and her father, who's a retired Marine gunnery sergeant, is living with his second wife in North Carolina on the other side of the country, enjoying a good but not a lavish retirement. So at 3 o'clock one afternoon, she gets a call from the Yosemite Park Police telling her that her son's had an accident and he's fallen 100 feet off of a rock cliff up there, and he's crushed his head on the rocks below. And he's currently in the hospital. He fell off a half dome. He's in the emergency room, and she's been told, she calls the emergency room, goes and visits him, and she's been told that if this child survives, he's going to have some serious brain damage and probably is going to need some long-term care for a long, long time. So the hospital is saying, here's your financial responsibility forms. We want you, the mother, to sign that you're financially responsible for paying for your 21-year-old son's medical bills. And many parents feel obligated, even though the child is older than the years, than the majority. So if you had this case, beyond the fright that this woman is going through, what would your best advice do? She needs to think clearly. What would you tell her to look at?
Well, whenever I have a situation where there's a lot of emotion involved, which there's going to be, I give people an opportunity to go ahead and express it until they're done. Let them take a deep breath and say, okay, we're going to focus on solutions now. And the first thing I would let her know is that because this child is over the age of 18, he's an adult, and therefore she's not responsible for him. And we can deal with this whole scenario as him being an adult, becoming eligible for benefits based on either his own work history or lack thereof. And then we would be looking at getting either SSI, SSDI. We would look at getting Medicaid, which in California we call Medi-Cal, which can pay bills up to 3 months prior. And unless he was covered by health insurance, if he had health insurance, then obviously that would take care of it. But there's always a way to deal with it. The real solution is understanding that there are options.
And not to delay, basically.
Exactly.
Don't make mistakes. I gave the same advice to the guy that I referred to earlier that used to work for me. I told him, don't sign those papers. Right. I wasn't in the financial world at that time, but that's an awful big responsibility to take on as a parent. And it could materially affect not only her life, but her daughter's life being able to go to school. So don't delay that there are benefits this child could qualify for. And so what would you do if you were her? I mean, what would you do with the hospital? Would you tell them that, no, I'm not going to sign and I'm going to be checking into benefits? How would you handle this?
Well, I would let her know that she just needs to let the discharge planner or whoever is working with her, letting her know about the billing situation, remind them. And you always want to do it in a way that you get a positive response. Remind them that he's over 18. And, as his mother, she will help him access the benefits he's entitled to take care of that hospitalization.
But she will not accept financial responsibility herself.
That's not fair, and there's no need for that.
Yeah, no, it could be devastating to her.
Yeah, it could wipe her out entirely.
Right. Okay, let's move to the third case. So now we have a couple in their mid-50s. They have 2 children. One's a 25-year-old daughter with a severe disability who can't live on their own. The other is 23, in a graduate school 1,500 miles away. Suddenly, the man's diagnosed with stage 4 pancreatic cancer and is given 6 months to live. He's not provided for any more life insurance for his family beyond the 3 times earnings that his group life policy gives him at his company, roughly, let's call it $450,000. He has about $178,000 in a 401k plan, and she has a $50,000 life insurance policy, but has only been able to work part-time at a local coffee shop just to have some respite type care, just to get away from the 24/7 care that she's been trying to provide the special needs child. They owe a couple $100,000 on a mortgage, have little or no other savings, but she knows clearly now with a 6-month diagnosis for her husband's life that he's not going to be there 6 months from now. And she might have struggles paying for all these bills, plus providing this, the 24/7 care. She's going to have to work. So in this specific case, if she has to work, she's going to have to put her daughter in some sort of daycare system where she's going to have a nurse come in and watch the daughter. So what type of benefits should she be trying to obtain, and how would she go about it?
Well, the first thing, because the father is dealing with cancer that's pretty severe, I would be looking to get father on SSDI benefits and see if the company, since it provided a good life insurance plan, had long-term disability insurance.
So you'd look at the father first, try to get...
I'd first start with the father, because you see, then we establish that we have a manageable household income. Then I would start working on the daughter's benefit issues.
Okay.
So the first thing I would do is make sure that we have a good foundation for mom and dad, so that mother doesn't have to worry about how am I going to pay the electric bill, how am I going to pay the mortgage payment, and make sure that we get the dad on Social Security disability insurance, see if there's any other benefits that his employer provided. The life insurance could even have what's called an accelerated benefit, which will give
where they advance death benefit. And then whatever he doesn't use, they give him back as a death benefit. Correct. At the end.
Yeah. So I would look at that. The other thing I would look at with the daughter is the daughter on benefits? And I would talk to the mother and say, when did the disability begin? Do we have evidence to show that the disability began between the ages of, there's my sweet spot, 18 to 22. Did the disability begin then? Do you have evidence then? Because if you do...
And that's the sweet spot, because that's the age where she's responsible for herself.
At 18, she's responsible for herself, and if the disability began before age 22, she's allowed to get benefits on a parent's record. So then dad would be getting disability. Let's say he's eligible for $2,000 a month. We could get the child on 50% of that if we can show that she is disabled prior to age 22, or at least get her on SSI.
So it could be a significant benefit for them.
Right. So mother wouldn't have to worry about how am I going to make ends meet. And then also we would look into in-home supportive services, which is what we call home care in the home in California, which possibly could provide respite care for the mother, or we could look at some of the different programs through Medicaid, which in California we call Medi-Cal, that provide respite programs.
And what would a respite program typically look like for a person?
It could be a day program, where the individual with the disability is dropped off in the 8 o'clock, and they pick them up like a job. It could be a day program, and then they have different activities and they're supervised depending upon.
But it would give this woman the ability to work at a meaningful job, and at the same time take care of her family's, her daughter's disability.
Yeah, it would give her more options. The key, the key thing is that people are not getting when they come across these scenarios is they have options. And oftentimes, whenever I speak to somebody, I'm always digging past what they're originally telling me to see if there isn't maybe something else that there might be that they're not aware of that's going to be able to assist them.
Right. Right. So you're giving a more comprehensive look at the entire situation. All right, Daniel, always a pleasure to talk with you.
Thank you.
Your knowledge and expertise makes a lot of people's lives better, and I'm very proud to know you and to have you on this program. I'd say to the audience, we hope that you've enjoyed this program and that it's been helpful to you in better educating you about some of the complexities involved when trying to stretch a family's financial resources to more fully protect the well-being and financial security of your family members with disabilities. At a minimum, we hope you've learned that there are right and wrong ways of applying for benefits. Making avoidable mistakes could be very costly to you, potentially resulting in the loss of thousands of dollars of benefits for your loved one. Third is the need for people to educate themselves and become knowledgeable about how these programs work right from the start. And really importantly, you have to appreciate that you are the best storyteller of your family member's disability. Don't rely on a medical professional or someone else to do it for you. And don't wait to the last minute to write and document their story. You don't have to do this alone. There are experienced professional people like Dan and myself, special needs trust attorneys, fiduciaries, and others that regularly use and coordinate Social Security and Social Security disability benefits. A team effort often helps us protect and preserve our clients' finances for providing the long-term care needs of their disabled family member. Thank you for watching.